So, if you like Vox's animation style as much as I do, you definitely want to watch this video. I'm going to recreate 5 lower thirds I saw in some of their most recent videos, and actually I'm going to show you some ways I think those could even be improved. So let's dive right into it. Alright, so here in After Effects I actually have 5 different compositions with 5 different references to some lower thirds created by Vox in their recent videos, and I'm actually going to go one by one and replicate them and show you how I would approach these and how I would create them from scratch. So let's start off with this one. So it basically has 3 elements. We have the name, we have the subtitle, and we have this little box that actually animates going in with a simple flicker. 1, 2, and it actually animates out with a simple flicker as well. So let's try to replicate that by using some very simple techniques in After Effects. So first of all, I'm gonna create this small rectangle here in After Effects. Let's try to use a nice green color like they did. Let's create a name title, and I'm gonna use a font called Kanit that I actually use a lot and I like it. It's not too similar to what's used originally, but I think it's gonna work well. And the subtitle font is actually gonna be Open Sans Bold, a very simple sans serif font. So I just wrote the subtitle, and I'm gonna play around with the sizing until it looks okay. And also let's make the fill for both of these texts a warm off-white color. To animate the rectangle in, we're just going to use a very simple opacity based keyframes. The first one is obviously going to be at 0%. The last one is going to be at 100%. Let's make it last 20 frames. And here we can have 2 flickers. Let's put the first one here so that it goes to 100%, goes back to say 50, and then from 50 comes back to 100 and comes back to 50 and ends up at 100 again. So let's try to do it every 4 frames. Let's try to have keyframes so that it looks like this. Now let's move on to animating the Mao Zedong name title. Originally, the animation is super simple. It's just typewriter effect, basically. However, it does appear to show 2 letters by 2 letters, which we are gonna achieve by just applying a simple posterized time effect to it. And to save ourselves from going in and doing the animation manually, let's just use the typewriter preset here in Effects and Presets, applied to Mao Zedong layer. Click on it, click U. Here you'll have those 2 keyframes that are created for the typewriter preset. Let's put the first one at the beginning, and the second one can also end roughly at the same time the flickering animation stops. Alright, as you can see now it goes 1 letter by 1 letter. If we want to have it a bit more jumpy like the original animation, I would actually do it by simply adding a posterized time effect to this layer, playing around with the values. It's obviously going to depend on your composition frame rate. Let's try an 8. That kind of works similarly. If you do some other values, you're going to have a bit of a different effect, but I think 8 is the sweet spot where we kind of have a bit of randomness going on. And that's pretty much it for these 2 elements. Now let's animate the last one as shown in the original. The last one slides down in this mask that is below the main text, below the name. So to create that, we are actually gonna have to create a mask, and let's just create a mask shape layer that we can create like this. Now if we obviously select the subtitle layer and pull the track matte to that shape layer that we can call mask, you can now see that when we move this text layer, it's just going to appear within the mask area. So to animate it, we're just going to click on it, click P, animate the position. This is going to be the end position, and the starting position is going to be somewhere around here. Let's ease these keyframes with F9. Let's go in the graph editor, create a nice easy animation, and let's make it a bit longer. And let's have it appear after the name is done. That's pretty nice. Actually, let's make it a bit more like this. All right, now all that's left is gonna be to create the exit animation. To create that, we're actually gonna reuse most of these keyframes actually. So let's just click U to show absolutely all the keyframes we used in this lower third. Let's click here and let's copy these and just simply reverse them. As we reverse them, the letters are gonna disappear, and also the position for the subtitle is gonna be animated as well. Let's just kind of have both of these animations going on at the same time, but we are gonna have to play around with the graph editor here. So click F9 and sort of replicate it. The entrance that we had, let's create an exit that's gonna be a similar shape to it. And for the rectangle itself, let's do one flash back to 50%, then back to 100, and then back to 0. And let's just move those back a bit so that the flicker serves as a sort of cue for the exit animations to happen. I would actually maybe have the Mao Zedong come out a bit sooner. And here is the full animation. To save you from doing all this work, you're gonna have the whole project in the description below. So click and download, it's free. Now the second example is actually very simple, even simpler than the first one. So to get started, let's just create two pieces of text. So let's create these two texts. I'm gonna be using Helvetica font, but in a black original version, and the bottom one is actually going to be regular, Helvetica regular. Let's make the top one a bit bigger at 50 pixels, and let's make these crisp white color. Now let's create two rectangles behind them. For this example, let's actually use blue rectangles, these dark blue rectangles. Let's rename them rectangle bottom and rectangle top. So we have these two elements, and as you can see in the original, we can set these two rectangles to be masks for their pieces of text right away, because that's how they actually behave. And the rectangles animate from left to right, and the texts animate from bottom to top, all at the same time. So we can actually do that very easily and very quickly here. What I would do here is I would click on each of these rectangles. I would take this anchor point and I would drag it here to the very left edge of this rectangle. And while holding Control, it's gonna snap to the edge. And I would do the same with the bottom one, so that when you animate the scale properties, you have to unlink the X and Y values, but when you animate them, it's actually going to animate from that point. And that's something that we can do right away, and actually keyframe these scale properties, go back to 0 frames and animate them in like this. And we can add a F9 to ease those keyframes. And in the graph editor, let's just do a flying animation like this. And now I'm actually gonna set the rectangles to be the mats for their texts. So the top one is gonna be a mat for the black text, for the Helvetica black text. Let's just bring it back on. And the bottom one is gonna be a mat for the regular text. After Effects automatically hides the mask layers, but we need to toggle those back on. We wanna see those backgrounds. And the last thing to do is to now also animate the texts themselves. We're just gonna do a position keyframe here. Let's go back to the beginning and let's just move those below like this so that it happens in a smooth way. Let's click F9 again. Let's create a nice animation for them to come in, and that's pretty much it. What I would do is I would probably do a bit of delay for the bottom one. However, that's on you. And what I would also probably do is I would add an adjustment layer, and I would also create a posterized time at 12 frames per second to give it a bit of a stop motion effect, just because I prefer that in my lower thirds. However, in the original, I think it was pretty smooth. Yeah, there was no stop motion here. So let's just keep it original for this example. And now the last thing that I would do here is to also create the exit animations, which for this instance, I would just animate these shape layers back to their starting positions, move that to the end of the composition, click F9 again, and in the graph editor, I would just have the animation to kind of go slowly and then end up fast. So here is the full final animation. All right, so the third lower third that we're gonna create is actually kind of a lower third that starts off as a full screen solid with this masked area that then animates out very simply, but I think it's very creative and a very nice way to present someone on screen. So let's just get started. I actually have my video here that I'm going to use as an example, and let's start out by creating a new solid. Let's use turquoise color like this one. Let's drag it up. And now we need to create that mask. That the simplest way to create it would be to just create a rounded rectangle, any fill color you want, and you draw it. You can draw it something like this. Make sure the size is actually 920, which is the width of the composition. So whichever composition width you're using, you can just use that number here. Let's use a much bigger roundness number so that you get the rounded edge that works for you. And then we're gonna call that layer mask. And we are actually going to take the track map pick whip from the solid, drag it to the mask, and we obviously need to invert it to get the inverted mask look that we're going for. We are gonna drag this up a bit. Let's type out my name. Put it like this. Let's kind of play around with the position. Let's draw a line that we are gonna make this stroke 3 pixels, this color, the same color I used for the text. And let me just center these two, and let me call this line, and center them, align the text and the line to be centered, and also align the line to the composition center. And then we can do another thing here. Use this text for this example here on the right side. We can make it a bit bigger. Now let's animate all of these elements, and the first thing that we're going to do is actually have the mask slide down from up to reveal the speaker in this way, and then let's have it ease in just a bit longer. And before that actually happens, we need the solid to appear just a few frames from 0 to 100, and then we have the mask effect. And as we have the mask effect, we can have all of these three elements to appear as well using the opacity property, which should be something fairly similar to what happens in the original. And then the exit animation is just going to be the line shrinking in and these three elements moving down and fading out. This is going to happen line by line, and this is going to happen similarly just a bit later, right when the mask comes down. So let's try to recreate it. First, let's actually animate the mask moving down in this way. And let's do an F9 here. We can make it a bit slower. And then what we're actually going to do is we're going to have this name part of it to actually disappear and fade out as that happens. But what we want to do is have it go down together with the mask. And I'm actually going to split this layer to just be able to parent this half of it to the mask so that it happens like this. And the video editing tutorial 5 vox lower thirds part of the animation, we are going to have to do that with the animate properties here. We are going to move them down, and we are also going to add a bit of opacity change to 0. And now we're just going to have to play around with these start and end values. We actually want to have the start to be at 100%, and we want to do the we want to change the value from 100 to 0 for the end property. So you can see that this happens with each letter actually going down and disappearing. However, in the advanced tab, we're going to change that to lines so that when that happens, we have the line by line disappearance for the end values. And let's have that finish by the time, almost by the time the other animation starts. And also the line at the same time needs to actually get a trim pots animator. That's going to actually happen from both sides and end up at 50% for both values so that it kind of shrinks down to the middle. Let's click U so that we can see all of these keyframes right now. And we are going to F9 these. And so it happens. That's pretty much it. The only thing that I would do is possibly play around with the graph editor for the mask, for its appearance and disappearance, to have a bit of a more smoother entrance and exit. However, that is more or less it. It has a few moving parts, but as you can see, everything is very simple, nothing too complex. Once again, the project is down in the description. Now, the fourth one does have some extra elements added to it. For example, this green line, and also the texts appear word by word. I don't really like that this happens to the graphic, that it's actually not masked within the background. And that's something that we are actually going to do. So let's just set it up. Let's use the active grotesque font for the top one, and for the bottom one, let's use a Helvetica. Let's use a regular font. Let's make it much smaller, and let's make the top one a bit bigger. Now the bottom one was in white color, the top one was in some sort of a gray color, however it had a off-white yellow background box. So let's just put it behind the active grotesque. Helvetica was against baby blue color, but let's put a bit of a darker one here, and let's just move those up. Let's just rename these layers. Bottom, we also had that green line that was happening somewhere around here. So let's just draw a nice green line. Let's make the stroke width 20 or 15. And that's the basic look that we are going for. But now let's do the fun part. Let's animate it. So in the original, the rectangles, both of the rectangles appear similarly to example number 2. Let's do that first, and then we can animate the words and the texts, and the line just has a trim path animator applied to it that we're going to create. First of all, let's do the same thing with the anchor point like we did for the example number 2. Just a quick side note, there is the Motion Tools plugin that I use for automatically snapping the anchor point to wherever you actually need it on the shape layer or any layer, but you can also do it manually like I did here. Let's animate the scale property from 0 to 100 for the first value, since we're only going to have to animate it from left to right. Let's ease those with F9, and let's do an animation like this. Let's have the top one appear a bit before the bottom one. And let's have both of them last a little longer. Let's apply those masks to both of these texts, even though in the original example from Vox that wasn't done, but I think it's going to look much better this way. The bottom Helvetica text actually had a very simple typewriter effect for it to appear. Let's have it appear a bit more quickly. And for the top text, we're actually going to have to use the animate properties, but it's very simple. We're just going to use the position property. Let's move it from below the text box up to its position. Let's keyframe the animator. Let's have a start and have it from 0 to 100. Let's have it appear and last approximately at around the same time the rectangle animation actually happens. But if you notice, it is going letter by letter and we need it to go word by word, and that's a simple fix in the animator 1 property, range selector, advanced, and based on words. Now it's just gonna happen word by word. It definitely needs a bit of easing to it, and the animation easing actually happens here in this property, ease high, ease low. And let's put the ease high to 20 and ease low to 50%. That looks much better. And we are getting close. The last thing we need to do is to animate the line itself. And let's just add a simple trim pass. Let's animate the end, have it appear like this, and then also have it disappear from its starting position. And we can have a bit of overlap here and F9 those in. We can make it last a bit longer. Holding Alt will spread those keyframes like that. And that is pretty much it. I think that's very close to what we were going for. To have it disappear, once again, I would just make it very, very simple by having the scale go back to 0 again. Possibly with a bit of delay or a difference in speed. And you could actually click F9, go here in the graph editor, and just have it go out like that. So that's pretty much it. That is this lower third example. Once again, this whole project is free for download. The link is in the description. Now, the last example that we're going to cover is going to be this very simple animation with a bit of a effect going on in the background. So let's just get right into it. This is going to be a very simple one. The font I'm going to use is actually going to be Railroad Gothic. So let's try to find it. It's here. Let's make it pure white color and let's make it 60 pixels and position it around here. The subtitle, it can actually be a simple sans serif, like an open sans. Again, and let's make it a bit smaller, 40 pixels, and make it all caps. Both the animations for these two pieces of text are very simple. The top one is just a simple position, push in from left side. Let's select them, F9 for the easing. Let's go to the graph editor and have a nice push in animation. Make it kind of short, snappy. And the bottom one is once again a very simple typewriter effect. They keep it very simple in Vox with these, but those subtle details are what actually make the difference. One of them is this background shape that has a $ mask that we're gonna recreate right now. And how I would actually do it is by using stroke shape. So I would create a stroke. I would make it very thick at around 50 for this example. Let's try to have it match the top text position. Let's make it even longer, like this. Let's rename it. Let's call it line. Let's add this dollar shape to it. So let's move it in a way where it would actually be the most interesting for the line to appear and to show the segments of the banknote. Let's try to cover the eyes and possibly some other details here on the right side. To see what's going on, let's make the line a mask for the banknote. Let's toggle the line back on because we are actually going to play around with the position and also with the blending mode of the banknote itself. So if we put it to be a multiply, it's going to take the color from the line itself so that we can play around with the color further. Maybe make it a bit darker, less saturated. And then we can start animating the line itself. Just a very simple trim pots animator, similar to what we did for that green line in the previous example. You can see how it appears, and we can also do the exit F9 these so that they move together like that. If we toggle back the text, we can see that the animations are to be moved at the beginning, and we can move the text at the front. And we're gonna play around with these values a bit and have the text appear a bit later. And what I would also do for this lower third would obviously be adding a bit of posterized time. I think this effect really requires some posterized time. That's also used in the original. Let's make it 12 frames per second. And here we have it. Very nice, very neat. I love the eyes that appear just for a split second before the texts appear. You can play around with the text sizes. I would probably go a bit smaller on this one to get more contrast in, but that's on you. So that's pretty much it. Those are 5 Vox lower third examples that we covered in this video. I hope you enjoyed it. You have this whole project in the description below to download completely for free. Feel free to download it so that you don't have to do any of this on your own. You can just reuse the elements and have fun with them. Lastly, thank you for watching. I will see you in some of my future tutorials. Bye.